£26.5 million cash disappeared from Northern Bank headquarters, and the robbers didn't even step into the bank. Just days before Christmas of 2004. In the heart of Belfast, one of Northern Ireland's most important banks was quietly going about its business. Employees were finishing their shifts. Security guards were preparing to close for the night. And inside the building was tens of millions of pounds in cash. But across the city, something far more sinister had already begun. Armed men had broken into the homes of two bank employees. Their families were taken hostage. Their wives were threatened. Their children were watched. And the message was brutally simple. Do exactly what we say, or your families will never see you again. This would become one of the largest bank robberies in British history, without alarms, gunshots, or a dramatic getaway. Just two bank employees, forced to betray their own workplace, while their loved ones were held at gunpoint. And even today, more than 20 years later, no one has ever been convicted of carrying out the robbery itself. This is the story of the Northern Bank heist. A robbery so carefully executed that it still haunts investigators to this day. Welcome to the Heist Vault. Behind every heist there is a story. Some end in prisons, some end in graves, and some simply disappear. In the early 2000s, Northern Bank was one of the most powerful financial institutions in Northern Ireland. With 95 branches across the region, it dominated the local banking market. At the center of its operations stood its headquarters on Donegal Square West in Belfast. The building looked ordinary enough, but inside, it held something unique. Northern Bank was one of only 4 banks in Northern Ireland allowed to print its own banknotes. Inside the vaults were millions of pounds in newly printed currency. Fresh banknotes. Uncirculated. Stacks of money waiting to be distributed across the country. For criminals planning the perfect robbery. This bank was a gold mine. And someone had clearly been studying it very carefully. Sunday night, December 19, 2004. While most of Belfast prepared for the holiday season, 2 families were about to experience the most terrifying night of their lives. The first target was Chris Ward, a Northern Bank employee living in County Down. Late that evening, armed men arrived at his home. They forced their way inside. Ward was taken. His family was left behind, with gunmen guarding the house. Ward was then driven across Belfast. His destination was another house, the home of his supervisor, Kevin McMullen. But when Ward arrived, the situation was already worse than he imagined. McMullen had already been captured. Men disguised as police officers had tied him up inside his own home. Meanwhile, McMullen's wife had been taken away to another unknown location. Both bank employees now understood the situation. Their families were hostages, and they were about to become unwilling participants in a massive robbery. This tactic had a name. It was known as a tiger kidnapping, and it was terrifyingly effective. The criminals gave the 2 men very specific instructions. They were to go to work the next morning, act normal, follow their usual routine, and do exactly what they were told. The gang even gave them mobile phones. Every move would be monitored. Every instruction would be delivered in real time. At 6 a.m. the next morning, the kidnappers left the houses. But their control had not ended. Ward and McMullen now carried the weight of a horrifying responsibility. If they failed, their families could die. When the 2 men arrived at Northern Bank headquarters that Monday morning, they tried to behave as normally as possible. No panic. No unusual behavior. No sign that their families were in danger. But soon the instructions began. Through the phones given to them by the kidnappers, the gang ordered them to conduct a small test. Ward was told to fill a bag with £1 million in £50 and £100 notes. He was then instructed to leave the bank carrying the bag, walk to a bus stop on Upper Queen Street, and wait. Moments later, a member of the gang appeared. He took the money and vanished. The test was complete. The gang now knew the plan would work. That evening, after the bank had closed to the public, the real operation began. Ward and McMullen remained inside the building. They began moving crates of banknotes, huge stacks of money stored inside the bank's vaults. They loaded them onto trolleys, but they had to move carefully. Security guards were still present in the building, so the two men created a simple story. They told staff they were removing rubbish for collection, to hide the money. They covered the crates with office furniture and empty cardboard boxes. Then they wheeled the trolleys from the basement toward the bullion bay. This was the loading area where money deliveries normally arrived. No one suspected anything. Once the trolleys were ready, Ward contacted the gang. Minutes later, a white van arrived at the bank. Security allowed it inside the loading bay. To them, it looked like a normal cash transport vehicle. Inside the bay, Ward and McMullen quickly loaded the crates. Stacks of money disappeared into the van. It took just 15 minutes. Then the van drove away. But the robbery wasn't finished. Soon after, the gang contacted the employees again. They were told to prepare more trolleys, fill them with as much money as possible, and wait. When the van returned, 2 more trolleys were ready. Again the crates were loaded. Again the van disappeared into the night. By the end of the operation, £26.5 million had been stolen. With the robbery complete, the 2 employees were given one last instruction: lock up the bank, set the alarms, leave as if nothing had happened. So they did. They walked out of the building, drove away, and returned to Ward's house. Inside, the gunmen were still guarding his family. At around 9 p.m., the criminals finally left. Before going, they carefully cleaned the house. They wiped surfaces, removed cups they had used, erased any forensic evidence. 20 minutes later, McMullen left and returned to his own home. Around the same time, McMullen's wife was driven to a remote forest and released. Cold and exhausted, she eventually found help. The alarm was raised. At 11 p.m., following his instructions from the criminals, Chris Ward finally called the police. He told them what had happened. By then, the robbers were long gone. When investigators counted the missing money, the total was staggering: £26.5 million. The haul included £16.5 million in newly printed Northern Bank banknotes, £5.5 million in used Northern banknotes, £4.5 million from other banks, plus smaller amounts in euros and US dollars. It was one of the largest cash robberies in UK history, and police immediately knew something important. This was not luck. It was planning. Meticulous planning. Within hours, the police service of Northern Ireland launched a massive investigation. 50 detectives were assigned to the case. Their mission was simple: find the money, find the robbers, and discover who had orchestrated the operation. But almost immediately, another question emerged. Who had the expertise to pull off something like this? Very quickly, attention turned toward one organization: the Provisional Irish Republican Army. Senior police officials believed the robbery required the kind of coordination and discipline associated with the IRA. Soon, the accusations became public. In January 2005, the chief constable of the PSNI stated that the IRA was responsible. The British government agreed. The Irish government also supported the claim. But the accusations created a political firestorm. Sinn Féin, The political party historically linked to the IRA strongly denied any involvement. The IRA itself issued a statement. It said simply, "We were not involved." But many politicians remained unconvinced. The robbery had come at a delicate moment. Peace negotiations in Northern Ireland were already fragile. And now, £26.5 million had disappeared. In early 2005, police began conducting raids across Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Homes were searched. Suspects were arrested. Money began to appear. In Cork, police discovered £2.3 million hidden in compost at the home of a financial advisor named Ted Cunningham. More money was recovered elsewhere. Bundles of cash hidden in strange places. Even boxes of detergent. Investigators soon suspected the money was being laundered through business networks. Cunningham was believed to be investing stolen funds in overseas properties, possibly in Bulgaria. The stolen cash was being moved through layers of financial transactions, trying to erase its criminal origins. Over time, police made numerous arrests. 13 people were detained. 22 properties were searched. But the cases quickly began to fall apart. Charges were dropped. Evidence proved insufficient. And the main suspects were never convicted of carrying out the robbery. In a surprising twist, one of the victims of the robbery became a suspect. Chris Ward himself. Police believed he might have been involved. He was arrested and charged. But at trial, the prosecution suddenly offered no evidence. Ward was acquitted. His lawyer described the case as a Kafkaesque farce, meaning a nightmare you can't help but laugh at. A desperate, hopeless scenario where the rules are so absurd, irrational, and nonsensical that the only logical reaction to the powerlessness is laughter. That was what the lawyer described the case as. One man did eventually face consequences. Ted Cunningham. In 2009, he was convicted of money laundering millions connected to the robbery. But even that case became complicated. His conviction was overturned, then retried. In 2014, he pleaded guilty to laundering about £275,000. But due to poor health, he avoided prison. Despite years of investigation, most of the stolen money was never recovered. Northern Bank even replaced its banknotes. New designs. New serial numbers. The uncirculated notes became difficult to spend. But the used notes were impossible to trace. Millions vanished forever. The robbery had consequences far beyond money. It damaged trust between governments. It strained the fragile Northern Ireland peace process. Relations between political leaders grew tense. Fundraising for Sinn Féin in the United States was temporarily blocked. And accusations flew between rival political parties. Years later, new evidence began to emerge. Leaked communication suggested that a senior IRA figure named Bobby Story may have organized the robbery. But no court ever proved it. And no one was ever convicted of the heist itself. Today, the Northern Bank robbery remains one of the most audacious crimes in British history. A carefully planned operation, executed without violence, carried out through fear and psychological control. 2 employees, 2 families, £26.5 million, and a mystery that still hasn't been fully solved. Somewhere out there, much of that money may still exist, hidden, spent, or waiting to be discovered. Because in the world of great robberies, sometimes the biggest question is not how the crime was committed, but who truly walked away with the prize. This is the Heist Vault. Behind every vault, there is a weakness. And this one? Family.